Parshas Vayikra, Tavshin Ayin Daled. We are back at the South Side Sandwich Shop. Lots of stuff going on here this week. Purim is just about a week away. Lots of Mishloach Manos for sale. Proceeds to a very chashuv tzedakah that been helping out for many years. Almanos and Yisoimim here in the town of Lakewood. You can stop by the Southside Sandwich Shop to contribute and do your best to help this most worthy organization. So many times when we are speaking about the Parsha, you hear me say that there's so much going on in this week's Parsha that we could go on for days just speaking about all the different things. This week, we know the Parsha speaks mostly about different korbanos and things of that nature, but this week it's a little different. We're going to speak about the first word, the first pasuk in the Parsha, and we can literally speak for hours on this pasuk. We're not going to do it. The cholent is going to get too cold. The kugel is going to be too cold, so we're just going to speak our normal allotted time, and hopefully you're going to have a lot of hana from this week's shir. The pasuk says, first pasuk of the Parsha, Vayikra el Moshe, Hashem called out to Moshe, Vayidaber Hashem elov me'oyel moyed le'mor. HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu from the oil moyed, and this is what he said. We all know, very famously, that the Aleph in the first word of the Chumash Vayikra, the Aleph in the pasuk, in the word Vayikra, is written small. When you compare it to the other letters in the Torah, there's a small Aleph over here. And the Medrash Tanchuma here says that this small Aleph is in direct correlation to what it says at the end of last week's Parsha. At the end of Sefer Shemois, the pasuk says, V'lo yochol Moshe lavoy el oyel moyed. Moshe Rabbeinu could not come to the oyel moyed, ki shochan olav he'anon, u'chvoid Hashem oleas hamishkan. That Moshe Rabbeinu felt it inside that he just couldn't get himself to come to the oyel moyed. Moshe Rabbeinu was standing outside the oyel moyed. Moshe Rabbeinu was apprehensive. Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid to enter the oyel moyed. So Vayikra el Moshe. That's at the end of last week's parsha. We said that. So at the beginning, right now, at the beginning of this week's parsha, Vayikra el Moshe. Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls out to Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Because he was so humble. And the Vayikra is written with a small aleph. Says in Nesivos Shalom, the Vayikra is written from the Medrash Tanchuma. The Vayikra is written with a small aleph to tell us that it was just for that reason that Moshe Rabbeinu was zoiche to this kriya. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu call out to Moshe Rabbeinu? Because Moshe Rabbeinu felt humble. Because Moshe Rabbeinu felt inadequate and not up to par to come to such a big, awesome covet of the Oyel Moyed. It's for that very reason that Moshe Rabbeinu felt humble. So Vayikra el Moshe, right there, HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls out to Moshe Rabbeinu, and the small aleph tells us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu called out to Moshe because he was humble. In Parshas Yisroi, at the time of Matan Torah, we find another time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu called out to Moshe Rabbeinu. Now listen to this pasuk. The pasuk says, by Kabbalas HaTorah, U'Moshe Ola El Ha'Elokim, Moshe went up toward HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and right then, Vayikra Elov Hashem Min Hahar. Moshe Rabbeinu was going up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu right then called out to Moshe Rabbeinu from the mountain. So the Zohar teaches us over there that we learn from that calling by Har Sinai. We learn from that calling something very different than the calling which we just said in Vayikra. We learn from that calling that Haboli Taher Misayin Oisai, like we mentioned a couple of weeks ago in the Shir also, that if a person comes to be Mitayer himself, if a person comes and wants to take steps toward HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Misayin Oisai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Min HaShamayim, they help a person. If he wants to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps you out to get closer to him. And that's, the Zohar says, from that pasuk, unlike the pasuk of Vayikra, it's a different lesson in Parshas Yisro. Unlike that pasuk, it's different. The Torah tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu took steps forward. Moshe Rabbeinu took steps toward HaKadosh Baruch Hu by Kabbalas Torah, and then right away, Vayikra Elav Hashem. You take a step and you make a move, and Hashem calls out to you. So we see that there's two different ways back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, two different Vayikras. One is what we just said now from the Parsha Yisro, U'Moshe Allah El Ha'Elokim. Moshe Rabbeinu took positive steps to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and right away HaKadosh Baruch Hu called out to him, "You're taking steps toward me." HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Kaviyachol, I'm going to come toward you. I'll help you out." And then there's another way. There's the way of what we said from the Vayikra in our parsha, which goes on the end of Parshas Pekudei. V'lo yachol Moshe lavoy Eloy Moed. Moshe Rabbeinu was an Anaf. He was so humble. He couldn't get himself to come to the Oil Moed. Then right away, this week's parsha starts Vayikra El Moshe. Where Moshe Rabbeinu just couldn't, he couldn't get himself to come, Vayikra El Moshe. We called out to Moshe Rabbeinu. The Nesivos Shalom proposes that there's actually a third way also. And this is an unbelievable thing, and it's a lesson for everybody. Nesivos Shalom says like this. The pasuk says by the sneh in Parshas Shemois, Vayar Hashem kisor lirois. HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that Moshe Rabbeinu turned away to see what's going on here. Why isn't this sneh, why isn't this thorn bush, why isn't it being consumed by the fire? Why isn't it getting burned? So the pasuk says, Vayar Hashem kisor lirois. Hashem saw that Moshe Rabbeinu turned to see, and right away, Vayikra Elav Hashem. Another time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu right away called out to Moshe Rabbeinu. Nesivos Shalom brings from the Sforna. The Sforna says that why did Moshe Rabbeinu turn away from the sneh? That Moshe Rabbeinu was sar lirois ulehisboinen. Moshe Rabbeinu turned away. He wanted to see what's going on here and to contemplate lihisboinen, to try to understand what's going on here. He wanted to step back and think about things, so to speak. You know, Moshe Rabbeinu just saw something, and it didn't make sense to him, right? So Moshe Rabbeinu said, "You know what? Give me a second. I have to think about what's going on over here." So although this might be a step below taking steps up, like we said by Kabbalas Torah, U'Moshe Allah Elokim, the Nesivos Shalom says, nevertheless, it is still a haboli tire. And how is this haboli tire? Moshe Rabbeinu, up to Nesivos Shalom, was thinking. Moshe Rabbeinu stopped and he thought. When a person stops and thinks, that's the first step toward HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You see something. You see something that doesn't make sense for you. You don't understand it. If a person stops and thinks, and you're not just on cruise, you're not just going through your life and running through it, you stop and think, that's already a first step. That's already also haboli tire. That's a third Vayikra. So we see that there are different ways here, and there are different mahalchim in coming close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and at each one, HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls out to you. So Nesivos Shalom says that we see from here that the ikar in life, a person has to know, is that you cannot become complacent and satisfied in your life with a status quo. You can't just be happy. Listen, this is me. I was this way when I was 13. I was this way when I was 20, 25, 30, because life runs by. And if you don't stop and think, if you don't stop and contemplate, if you don't give yourself the capability to raise yourself, to go up, nothing's going to happen. A person, you have to know, you have to do something. Make a move, and if you make that move, then you're zoichet to siyata d'shmaya. We see three different ways, three different types of ways in the Torah, that there was a move, there was something done, and right away, Vayikra El Moshe. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu called out to you. He's waiting for you to at least stop and think, to contemplate. Nesivos Shalom says a person has to know you should never find yourself in a place where you just come to terms. A person, sometimes you say, listen, I can't do any better. How can I really, how can I learn more? How can I be nicer to people? How can I stop speaking Lashon Hara? It's so impossible. It's such a big mountain. You know what? I'm happy I'm not doing worse things. I'm happy I come to terms with your place in life. That's very dangerous. And Nesivos Shalom does add to this, though, before we put all three madregas on par. He says, although each of these three ways can bring you siyata d'shmaya, the highest madrega is still that of being an anav. Of this week's parsha, of the Vayikra, with the small aleph. Being humble inside. We see by Parshas Shemini, a riot to this, by Parshas Shemini. In Parshas Shemini it says that Aaron HaKohen had to be told, Kirav al HaMizbeach. Aaron HaKohen was told, after the Shiva Simei Miluim, Vayhi Bayom HaShmini, Aaron HaKohen had to be told, you know what, Aaron HaKohen, come to the Mizbeach. Why was Aaron HaKohen apprehensive about coming to the Mizbeach? So the Medrash says that Aaron HaKohen saw a demus of an egel on the Mizbeach. And it reminded Aaron HaKohen of the Maisa egel, and he was embarrassed. So Aaron HaKohen didn't want to come to the Mizbeach. So Moshe Rabbeinu told Aaron HaKohen the following, Lama ata boish. Why are you embarrassed? Why don't you come to the Mizbeach? Lekach nivcharta. This is what you were chosen for. This is your mission in life. Why are you embarrassed? You can't be embarrassed now. You have to do this. So Pashup Pshat is that it's your job. It's a person. You have a job. We all know. You tell a person, hey, listen, you can't goof off. This is your job. Aaron HaKohen, this is your job. You got to come to Mizbeach. You got to do it. The Nesivos Shalom says from Reb Chaim Vital a beautiful, beautiful pshat, and it's a little bit different. He says, Lekach nivcharta. Moshe Rabbeinu told Aaron HaKohen, you know why you were chosen to be the one to come to the Mizbeach? Because, this is the reason, because you're embarrassed, because you're not a Baal Gaiva, because you feel humble, because you are reflecting on things that you did, and you think maybe because of those things you don't deserve everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving you in life. Lekach nivcharta. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu likes. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. That's why Dafka, you were chosen. So come now and do the Avodah. Ki lekach nivcharta. It's even more beautiful when you have this midah. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks for. This is the midah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. Klal Yisrael, when did they reach the highest madrega they were at? Dafka after the Maisa, the Cheta Egel. After they did tshuva, after they were humbled, after they saw that, you know what, we're capable, unfortunately, of doing such averas. We have to be careful. We have to do tshuva. That, once they knew their shortcomings, they were able to reach the highest madrega, being humble. And it's exactly then that Moshe davened for Klal Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu saw the madrega that they could reach. And this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants Vayikra el Moshe. That in many different ways, first of all, the most important way is to be humble. To understand where you are in life, and to understand that no matter how much you think you've grown and how much you think you've done, you haven't done a fraction of what you're capable of doing. You haven't done a fraction of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. Vayikra el Moshe. Be humble, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will reach out to you. Let it shine off your face that you're humble. That the Vayikra should stand out. There's a small aleph over there to know that you're humble. And of course, there's a way of going up. There's a way of also, Moshe Olo Elikim. Once you start raising yourself up, then you're Zoiche to the other Vayikra. And with each of these lessons, with each of these ways of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Avodas Hashem, we should be Zoiche to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.